This is the Awful Announcing Podcast. Here's your host, Brandon Contes.
All righty, welcome to episode 103 of the Awful Announcing Podcast. I'm your host, Brandon Contes, and this week with the NBA Finals still underway and the NBA Draft next week, we are joined by an ESPN NBA analyst. He is also ESPN's lead college basketball analyst. He is Jay Bilas. Jay, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. So you both played at Duke. You were drafted by the Dallas Mavericks. He is expected to be drafted by the Dallas Mavericks. A lot of similarities between you and Cooper Flagg. When all is said and done, who do you think is going to end up having the better playing career?
My sense is it's going to be Cooper Flagg. That's a tough call, though. Yeah, he's ridiculous. I think he's the best freshman Duke's ever had, and that's saying something given the freshmen that Duke has had over the last 30, 40 years, maybe even beyond that. But you don't find 17, 18-year-olds. I mean, he's barely 18 years old right now, and the polish and maturity he shows. People talk about, will Dallas trade the pick? I just can't imagine a scenario where you trade that because he's the future for them.
So would you say that that Cooper exceeded the expectations and hype at Duke then in his one season?
Yeah, absolutely. And hype is kind of an interesting word. I tend to think hype is like, to me, it always commands or conjures up the image of like a carnival barker saying, look right here, and it doesn't live up. I think what everybody said about Cooper Flagg was fact. And it doesn't mean that the player's going to continue to grow on the same trajectory, but he was the real deal coming in. Like there's a number one player in high school every year, but they're not all the same. And this guy's in the different category where they don't come around like him all that often.
What is or who is the best NBA comp for Cooper Flagg?
Yeah, that's a good question. A lot of NBA scouts. I've never been good at that. You can do the size comps and certain aspects of a player's game, but oftentimes I wind up going who he looks like. But a lot of NBA people that I know when he was in high school said Andre Kirilenko. But I actually think he's a little bit more gifted on the offensive end. The one thing that stands out about Cooper Flagg to me, above all others, we can talk about the attributes physically, athletically, how he shoots it, how he handles it, how he passes it, how he defends. But the thing I like about him best is he's not one that's interested in numbers. What he does is he makes the right play on that play. And then he winds up stacking the right play over and over again. And then by the end of the game, he's compiled really impressive numbers. There's some games where he has really high scoring numbers. I was in the building when he had I think it was 42 against Notre Dame. And other games, he scores 18, but he's got 13 rebounds and 7 assists and 3 steals and 3 blocks, stuff like that. He just seems to make the right play over and over again. And that's how his numbers are compiled rather than him thinking about numbers.
So do you think that going into the NBA, he's almost going to have to learn to be a little more selfish at times? I'm thinking to like right now with Tyrese Halliburton, and I know they're different players, but if Halliburton has a game where he doesn't score a lot, even if he's filling up the rest of the stat sheet, he does kind of face a lot of that criticism. So I'm just kind of curious how that will translate to the NBA for Flagg.
Well, I mean, he's going to have an adjustment just like everybody. I mean, when I was a college player, 22-year-olds came out and they were considered rookies that had a lot to learn. Now you have a 22-year-old player in the draft. People tend to assume that it's kind of a finished product, really close to the ceiling and all that. I just don't think that's true, certainly with every player. But the issue with Halliburton is an interesting one when you talk about Cooper Flagg. Like it depends if the situation calls for him to be a scorer, he can be a scorer. But but he plays a complete game. So I'm not too concerned about that. The idea that, hey, he has to put up a certain number, average a certain number. He's going to mature as he goes through his career, but he's an all-around player. He plays both ends of the floor. And in fact, you could argue that his defense is more impressive than his offense, and his offense is really impressive.
What did you think when the Mavericks traded Luka Doncic to the Lakers during the NBA season?
I was shocked like everybody else. It's the biggest sort of star trade there's ever been in midseason NBA. You've never seen that at the trade deadline. So I was shocked. But I also took kind of a wait and see approach with it. It wasn't, something where you're going, okay, well, you got to scorch the earth here because this was done and it surprised me. I still think you have to wait and see how it works out for both teams. The only thing that raised my eyebrows with it was, did Dallas get enough for it? But, and I haven't really talked to people in the NBA about this, but if if Dallas had decided to make it open, kind of understood by the league that he was available, does that squelch the opportunity to do it? I don't know the answer to that. I haven't really dived into that, but that's something that popped into my head at the time. Like that surprised everybody because they kept it quiet and they didn't open it up to a lot of teams. So that probably, you could argue, that limited what they got in return. But if they really wanted to do it and it was an open, everybody knew about it, maybe the uproar that could have been caused might have made it difficult to make a move that they wanted to make.
And then what did you think about all the conspiracies about the draft lottery being rigged for Dallas after they traded Luka? Then they get the number 1 pick and the opportunity to draft Flagg.
Maybe it's good that there's that kind of interest, that it pops up those conspiracy theories, because from the very first year of the draft in 1985, there have been these conspiracy theories. And back then, if you remember, I don't know how old you are. I'm a lot older than you, I can tell. But when that happened, they had this plexiglass bowl and a bunch of big envelopes in it. And one of the theories was that the Knicks envelope was kept in a freezer, so you could reach in and feel for the cold one and pull it out, and all of a sudden the Knicks get Patrick Ewing. It's laughably absurd that they would do that. But now trying to rig the draft is an impossibility, not a practical impossibility. It's an impossibility. Every team's in the room when it happens. They have an accounting firm that handles it. It's independently done. And David Stern used to say this. You probably heard it. Whenever he would be asked, he would say, you realize what you're talking about with this conspiracy theory is a federal crime. And the idea you could keep that secret. It's absurd. But if it generates more interest, I'm good with that. That's fine. But it's kind of laughable when you really think about it.
Yeah, I was born in '88, but grew up a Knicks fan and a diehard Patrick Ewing fan. So well aware of all those conspiracy theories as well. And yeah, just to think that it could possibly be going on right now, and that the other owners would be okay with it. Just kind of gifting the number 1 pick away to a different team is crazy to think. Even just that factor alone, aside from all the other challenges and the fact that it would be a federal crime. But I don't know, it's at least a fun talking point at some points, especially because it's so ridiculous. Like the fact that there is no validity behind it just kind of makes it a fun thing to pop up every so often. If you are Dallas, would you trade Cooper Flagg for Giannis if that was on the table? Obviously, Giannis would have to be interested in it too, but from the Maverick standpoint, would trading Flagg for Giannis be something that interests you?
Not me, no. But I could understand certainly that in a win now scenario. But with Cooper Flagg, you have win now and win in the future. And I just don't see trading away the next decade plus of Cooper Flagg for kind of a win now scenario when you're already pretty good. I thought, and reason minds could differ on this, basketball minds. Christmas Day, I was in Dallas for Minnesota-Dallas Christmas Day game, the one that Doncic got injured in. And before he was injured, I was saying I actually think Dallas is better this year than they were last year when they went to the NBA Finals. And obviously things changed with Doncic's injury and then the trade, and then Kyrie Irving getting injured. And they still were a play-in team out of the West. So they've got pieces, and they're not far away. And Cooper Flagg gets them that much closer to being championship level again.
What is Flagg's personality like? Like, how will he resonate with NBA fans?
I think he'll do great. He's not the most demonstrative in an interview, so he's not going to capture your attention with pithy responses and being really funny and all that. Really good kid and great teammate and all that stuff. And he's got this competitive gene that not a lot of players have. Like, a lot of players are ultra competitive, but he's on the upper tier of competitive athletes, in my view, and from what I have seen. So, I have to keep reminding myself how young he is. I mean, he played most of the season, or he played the first half of the season at 17 years old. And, his birthday is right around Christmas. I think it's December 21st. He turned 18 in late December. So, most of these guys now, I mean, that was about the age of players when I played. But now most of the players come into college close to 19. And at that age, that extra year is a big deal. So he's got a lot of years ahead of him. So I think you're going to see him mature, not only physically in his game and all that, but in every other way as he gets older.
Is it as important for the NBA to establish its next face of the league, like somebody to take the baton from LeBron James, as some fans and some sports talkers have made it out to be, especially in recent months?
I mean, I think it's helpful to have players that you believe may be able to do that. I can't remember what it was earlier this year where there was a discussion about a player being the potential face. Maybe it's Anthony Edwards. I can't remember. Some sort of face of the league discussion, and I can't remember who made the point, but they were saying, look, you don't just say he's the face of the league. That's something that has to be earned and proven over time. But if you have a belief that this person can do it, it generates additional interest in it, and certainly makes it more interesting. One thing that I have learned in my own career in life is, I think when I started doing the draft 22, 23 years ago for ESPN, there was probably this part of me that thought that you could scout a player and you knew. And I got over that pretty quickly. Nobody knows. Nobody knows. You believe, and you do as much homework as you can to try to make a projection. But nobody knows what's going to happen. Like, hands up all those when Shai Gilgeous-Alexander was drafted 11th, said future MVP, superstar, Hall of Fame player. Now you're saying it. Same thing with Nikola Jokic. Nobody was saying, oh boy, look at this guy when he was taken in the second round.
Yeah.
Isn't that called the Taco Bell pick now?
Yeah.
We were in commercial when he was drafted, and there was Taco Bell commercial playing. Like that's hilarious to me. But nobody knows. And I think that's one of the things that makes the draft kind of beautiful and delicious, that we really don't know. And we can look back and we're going to be wrong. We'll all trumpet when we were right and try to push aside the times we were wrong.
We're recording this podcast on Tuesday. It's going to be released on Friday. So I don't want to spend too much time on the NBA Finals because it will either be over or headed to a Game 7 by Friday morning. But I will just ask, and again, similarly saying, you nobody knows, can't predict the future. But but does it look like Oklahoma City has the opportunity to become a dynasty if things were to break right in the years ahead?
Yes, because Sam Presti, if there's anybody as good or better than he is in putting together a team and running an organization from a personnel standpoint, I don't know who it is, and there aren't many that are on his tier. I'm not going to say he's alone, but there aren't many. And the number of assets that they have. So as players become more valuable and more expensive, and a lot of guys on the Thunder are going to get more expensive. They have so many draft assets and other assets that they can make moves and keep themselves, keep that team right up there. So with the second apron from the new collective bargaining agreement, things are more difficult. And what is it now? After this year, it'll be 7 different NBA champions in the last 7 years.
Yeah.
There are some that really like that. There are some that don't, that prefer a dynasty. But it's going to be a lot harder going forward. But if any team is in position to knock on the door and break it down to win NBA championships, I think it's Oklahoma City.
I don't think the press release has not gone out yet, but I think it's safe to assume you'll be on ESPN again next Wednesday night for the draft, correct?
Yeah, they told me I'm on it, and if I'm not, I wish they'd tell me so I could stop doing all this work.
Yeah. So what goes into your draft prep?
A lot. It's kind of a year-round thing, Brandon. Like I don't want to sit here and say, well, I'm constantly thinking about it throughout the year, but as I'm doing games and studio and all that stuff, and being in practices and all the games I see and watch, I'm always preparing scouting reports for games and players that I know I'm going to use for the draft. So, and you try to keep, like, I watch a lot of games during the course of the year. As we get toward the middle of the year into January, February, and all that, how teams perform kind of pairs down how much I'm watching of particular teams. Like it's pretty clear kind of January, February, this team's not a tournament team, but I'm still watching them if they've got an NBA prospect to make sure that I'm keeping up with how that prospect is playing, maturing, performing, all that stuff. And then I compile everything right after the season's over and put it together. And I try to pay attention to the analytics part of it. And then you do your best you can to rank them. And I do it. I don't do it based upon like some mock draft scenario where I think this is going to take Dallas is going to take this guy, and then you're going to see San Antonio take this guy, and then Philly take this guy, and all that stuff. I don't do it that way. I do it based upon what I think. Here's who I think are the best prospects in order. And I try not to let where the player is going to be drafted or what I've heard about this team. Like this team needs a shooter, therefore they're going to take Trey Johnson of Texas or something like that. I do it based on what I think, and I don't know whether that's right or wrong, but that's the way I try. And you're going to get influenced by certain things. I get that, but I try to do the best I can on that.
Are NBA teams devaluing first round picks? Like the Knicks traded 5 first round picks for Mikal Bridges last year. The Orlando Magic, they just traded 4 for Desmond Bane. I think I'm pretty sure it's more than half the league. I think 17 teams don't own their first round pick in this year's draft. Like it feels like teams are just are passing those first round picks out more than ever.
It does seem that way. Some of them, and then some of them are doing what Oklahoma City's doing, and they've got a ton of draft capital. I tend to think the way Oklahoma City's doing it is the way I would prefer. I can't tell you what I think is right or wrong, but I prefer the way Oklahoma City views it because I think draft assets are really valuable. So you don't just give those away, but if you have a scenario where you can give up a little bit or maybe a lot in order to get something you really need now, that's going to make a huge difference for you, I get it. But I mean, if you look back in sort of the history of major sports drafts, teams that have given up a ton. Remember Dallas and the Herschel Walker trade and all that, when they got all that draft capital, that turned into Super Bowl wins for them.
Yeah.
And I'm not suggesting that the NFL and the NBA are the same, but they're not that different. Where having having draft capital is somehow not important in basketball, and it is important in football. I don't believe that to be true.
How has the development of the international game and the international players changed, say, from when you started covering the draft to what it is today?
It continues to improve, I think, worldwide. That's a really interesting discussion point, Brandon, because you'll hear some people say when the NBA is what now, 20% international players, give or take. And you'll hear people say, well, it's an American game, and that just shows how far America has fallen in its development of players and coaching and teaching, and the AAU culture gets blamed and all that stuff. That's a convenient target. And I'm not saying that's wholly inaccurate, but the way I view it is since 1992, when the Dream Team went to the Olympics and won in commanding fashion, was still hailed as maybe the greatest team in any sport of all time. That exploded international basketball. And it's kind of arrogant of us to think that when the rest of the world invests this much in the second most popular sport in the world, that somehow we're going to have all the best players. That makes no sense. Of course, we have the most best players, but we don't have all of them. And the rest of the world is bigger than us. So of course they're going to have great players that come from Serbia and Germany and France and Latvia and all these different, Croatia, that are going to come into the NBA and do really well. But we still have most of the best players. But the idea that we should have them all, or close to them all, or we do have the overwhelming majority at 80%, but we're not going to have them all anymore. Like, that's not going to happen. And we've seen it in baseball. We've seen it in other sports. You got to give some credit to the rest of the world here. It's really impressive how basketball has grown globally, and we're seeing it in the NBA.
Was there also a delay in NBA teams prioritizing international scouting? Like, was there a period of time where NBA teams just missed out on talent overseas because they just weren't looking there?
Maybe, but also I think back in the day, it was a lot harder to get international players into the NBA.
Yeah,
they had professional contracts. When I was in college, the Soviet Union was still going, and so you could draft Arvydas Sabonis and Šarūnas Marciulionis and all that stuff. They couldn't come over.
Yeah.
So Sabonis, who at one time in the mid to late 80s was, I think, arguably the best player in the world, couldn't come over to the NBA until he was late in his career and had suffered injuries and all that. So the Arvydas Sabonis that we saw was not the best version of Arvydas Sabonis, and still he was amazing. So there were challenges back then, but clearly, yeah, the game is I think every team has invested significant resources in international scouting, because great players are everywhere, and if you're not invested in that, you're going to miss out.
What year did you start at ESPN?
I started in 1995, so it's been 30 years.
And so, were you ever a full-time lawyer?
Oh yeah, for 8 years. Yeah, I was a full-time practicing attorney for 8 years and did broadcast work on the side. At least I told my firm it was on the side. Did it on the side, and then after about 8 years, I went full-time with ESPN, and then my legal career was my secondary gig.
So when you were going to law school, did you know that you wanted to be a broadcaster at that point? Like, how did you end up then doing both?
I thought when I was in law school, I was also a graduate assistant coach, and I wanted to get into coaching. I thought that's where I'd spend my sort of my time and my career. But after getting engaged to my wife, Wendy, we just decided that a coaching life was probably not the best thing for us in having a family. That my wife and I just decided that that's going to be a lot of moving around, and that's going to impact our kids more than we would like. So I decided to go the law route and be a lawyer. So I had some thoughts and ambition to do broadcasting work from the time I was in college and law school and all that, but it wasn't something I felt was a stable choice out of law school. And honestly, I kind of dismissed it when I became a lawyer. If I hadn't gotten a phone call, I got a phone call, in my office from a guy named George Habel, who was the president of the Capital Sports Network at the time. They did radio, and I started doing radio games. I thought it'd be fun, get me out of the office once in a while. I get to see my friends in basketball, and I did it for a couple of years, and one thing led to another, and TV kind of followed, and I started doing more and more games, and it became more and more difficult to have a life beyond law and basketball. So I had to choose, and I chose the one that got me better seats to games.
And you still practice law?
Technically, yeah. I'm still licensed to practice. I'm still with my same firm that I joined in 1992, Moore and Van Allen, in Charlotte. So technically, yeah. But I don't really bill hours as a lawyer anymore. I still will do some discrete tasks here and there, but mostly what I do for the firm is business development, try to bring clients in and do some recruiting work. But that's about it. And I'm not even good enough to play on our lawyers league team anymore, so I'm no value there anymore.
That can't be true.
I'm too old. Like, I'm not. There are two things I will never do again. I will never play competitive basketball, and I will never play pickleball. I'm not doing either one of those endeavors.
I'll ask a sort of a legal question, but earlier this month, a judge approved the $2.8 billion settlement that the NCAA is paying college athletes in back pay for NIL between 2016 and 2024. How is this getting divided between the athletes?
Are you talking about the $2.8 billion in back damages?
Yeah.
I don't really know the answer to that. I have yet to pour through the settlement to determine that. The lawyers will get their cut of that, and then what's left over will be paid out. I assume that it's going to be based upon perceived value of the players.
Okay. Yeah, that was what I was curious. Is it going to be based on perceived value, or is it just an even split?
I mean, I could see it being an even split, but I doubt it. I doubt you're going to see, sort of a male gymnast that had opted into the settlement getting the same thing as a Heisman Trophy winning quarterback.
Yeah.
I can't imagine that's going to be the case, but that to me, the back damages amount is less about what the players receive and more about it's really, to me, almost like a punitive thing for the NCAA. I mean, for decades upon decades, the NCAA has been violating federal antitrust law with an illegal wage cap on players. And the settlement itself going forward, you didn't ask this, but the settlement itself going forward is just one illegal wage cap, a higher illegal wage cap in place of a lower one. So really what it is just it's a period of time that the NCAA has to figure out what it's going to do going forward that's going to be sustainable and the right thing. That could be collective bargaining with the players. That could be one avenue that the NCAA takes. It could be taking away all restrictions on schools and they just do what they want, just as they do in literally every other area of their existence. There's no cap on what they can pay coaches, what they can spend in facilities, what they can do with any other student than an athlete. Another avenue, and this is I think the most likely for the NCAA to really pursue, is to go to Congress and say, you told us to get our act together before we came to you. We've achieved this settlement in a framework, and now we'd like you to take this settlement and make it into law. And I think they have a puncher's chance at that. It's not going to be exactly the way the NCAA wants, because I can't imagine the Congress is ultimately going to say, all right, here's your limit on athletes. Go to town paying yourselves. I don't think that's going to happen. And I don't think the NCAA is going to be allowed to, whatever law they may get, they're going to be allowed to enforce it. They're not going to, they're not going to let the fox rule the hen house, if you will. But I could see Congress coming in and saying, okay, well, we're willing to give you this amount of stability.
Should the NCAA be able to continue as a nonprofit organization?
I don't think that really matters. Like, the NCAA doesn't house all this money in Indianapolis. It's a pass through, just like, the NFL office and the NBA office, those are nonprofit.
Yeah.
The individual schools get the money. So the NCAA does spend a lot of money, a lot of it on legal fees. They spend way too much in salaries, frankly. And they do too many things that they're not good at. They're really good at running championships, really good at that. And I do think that they should oversee some discrete issues of athlete eligibility. But other than that, the individual schools can take care of their own business. They don't need the NCAA to do as much as they've done over the years.
So is the $2.8 billion coming from schools or coming from the NCAA, or is it a combination?
It's a combination. Yeah. So the schools, the conferences, they're going to have to pony up. And the NCAA does have some reserves. They've been planning for this for a while. But if the case had not been settled and had gone to trial, I don't know the exact number, but the NCAA was looking at around a $5 billion plus or minus judgment against it. And in antitrust cases, damages are tripled. They call them treble damages. So whatever the number was, the damages number, that would have been times 3. If you'll remember back in the day when the USFL sued the NFL in antitrust, it was a $1 judgment.
Yeah.
It wound up being $3 because it was tripled. So what a win.
What is the relationship between the NBA and college basketball? Because like the NBA benefits from college players becoming known names and stars. And I know the NBA is working on building the G League, but it almost seems like they'd be better served investing in college basketball, if that makes sense.
I happen to think that's right. I think reasonable minds can differ on that. One thing I will tell you is that I believe is that whatever criticism there is of a lack of cooperation between the NBA and the NCAA is not the NBA's fault. The NCAA's fault. Like, there is nobody in charge of that particular issue or issues like it.
Yeah.
There's nobody that you can pick up the phone. If you have an idea about how to cooperate and how to make things better between the highest level of professional basketball and then the second highest level of professional basketball in this country, because the NCAA has been professional basketball for decades now, not just with NIL. It was pro way before. Because now that players are allowed to be compensated to an extent, you'll hear people say, well, it's just minor league basketball now. No, it's not. Minor leagues do not make billions of dollars in media rights deals. Minor leagues do not pay their coaches millions. Minor leagues are not on television like this and draw crowds like this and have events like this. This is major league, and it has been for decades. But there's nobody you can call. There are committees and all this stuff. It's impossible to move with any sort of alacrity. Like, look how long it took to get a 30-second shot clock, like in men's college basketball. Women's college basketball moves pretty quickly. Men's, forget it. And I mean, look how long it took to fix the replay rule. Like, finally, after all these years, we're going to the NBA rule of coaches' challenges so that the games don't drag on. And every time the ball goes out of bounds, we're examining the Zapruder film to see who it went off of at the end of the game. Thankfully, that's been fixed.
Will NIL start to entice players to stay at schools longer?
It already is. Yeah. It's not going to, NIL and players being compensated by schools now going forward with the revenue sharing. It's not going to keep Cooper Flagg in school for a minute longer than it would have otherwise. But players who have a little bit more difficult decision, maybe I'm a late first, maybe I'm not, those kind of things, it's keeping them in school longer. Absolutely. And to me, that's nothing but a good thing. So for those that say and believe in education, that say they believe in education, players are staying in school longer to pursue their educations. They're more mature. And then the schools themselves get more years of service on the floor out of those players. How is that anything but a good thing? The issue now is with all of the things that have changed over the last several years, it's affected high school recruiting. Fewer high school players have the same amount of choices that they had 10 years ago. But that's, transfers may be more valuable now than a high school recruit. But in my view, if the NCAA does this right, then what are the chances of that? With the settlement, schools can now sign players to multi-year contracts, and in those multi-year contracts, they can put buyouts in those. And with a buyout, it's going to be more expensive for them to move around. And same thing with roster limits. We needed roster limits a long time ago. Have a reasonable roster limit, and there'll be fewer landing spots with roster limits when you combine those two things. The only thing I need to learn more about is sort of the idea of a buyout amount counting against the cap of the school the player goes to. That may be a legal issue that the NCAA needs to wrap its head around and make sure they get right.
I know you mentioned before that you were an assistant coach while you were going to law school, and you were at that time considering pursuing a career in coaching. Have you ever thought about going back to coaching?
I've had offers to do it over the years and offers to do other things in basketball, but I think primarily I've stayed where I am because I really like what I'm doing. And part of it too, Brandon, was when I got offers before, my kids were at different stages of life. So you had them in high school, didn't want to move them around. So that they were more family oriented decisions that were made. But now that, my kids are 30 and 28 now, and they're out of the house and, gainfully employed, thankfully. And they're great at that age. So now, who knows what happens in the future? We all work in a volatile business, so you never know when you're going to be shown the door. So there are other things to do, and maybe someday I'll do it.
Were you ever close to leaving ESPN for a coaching opportunity?
No. I mean, I'm one of those that, even though I don't talk about it publicly, I consider everything.
Yeah.
I don't make it public. But I'm not one of those that just says, nope, not going to consider it. I think that can be foolish if you do things like that. But I would always consider any reasonable offer. But there's never been anything that made me jump. I really like what I do. It's really fun. And we work hard at it, but we're not, you have to understand, we're not like breaking rocks and carrying heavy objects around for a living. So I realize how fortunate we are to be doing this. But at the same time, we all serve at the pleasure of our employer. So at some point they're going to want me out, and I, hopefully I can do something else.
ESPN used to loan you to CBS for the NCAA tournament. That stopped in, I think it was 2010. But how did you enjoy doing the tournament?
I loved it. It was fantastic. It's our national championship, so it was fantastic. The games were great, and I really enjoyed the people I worked with CBS. It was just a joy, and I was doing both. But being able to do games at that time of the year, I still now do games for ESPN International. So I do the Final Four for ESPN International. It's the same picture, same feed, just different announcers that goes to the rest of the world rather than the United States. So hopefully I'll get an NIL deal in Latvia or something from that. But it's a blast. Just being at the game is fantastic, but being courtside for it is even better.
So has CBS ever tried to get you back to do the tournament again in these last 15 or so years?
I have no idea. That has never been my call. It was all ESPN having to agree to it, because my contracts, not to get too far into this, my contracts with ESPN have always been exclusive. I'm exclusive to ESPN. So I can't do anything for anybody else without ESPN say so. So when they traded me over there, I was like, that's great. When they didn't, I've never expected it. But I'm open to it because it was so much fun.
Do you like working Duke games? Because I imagine you get complaints from both sides. The other team's fans saying that you're a homer, and then Duke fans saying you're trying too hard not to be a homer. So like, did you ever feel like you were trying too hard? Was there pressure when calling Duke games?
No, never. I mean, I can't say that when I first really got going as a broadcaster that it wasn't something that was kind of hanging there. But after 30 years of doing this, it's not even a concern. Like if I haven't built up the credibility for reasonable people to know that I don't care who wins, I don't care. And that was a difference when you first started. Like I had honestly never gone to a game before where I didn't care who won. And as a broadcaster, you do so many games. Like who has the bandwidth to care who wins? I don't care. Every team's on their own. And when they do when they're really good, you say so. When they're not good, you say so. It's not that big of a deal. Like to me, fair isn't difficult. Being unfair is difficult because then you have to explain it and try to stay in a certain lane. That to me, that would never work. But I've never worried about that. And I get it. I don't have any problem with people can say whatever they want. When people are critical and we don't take as much criticism as players and coaches do. We take some. But when you get criticized, the way I look at it is the criticism right? If it's right, I deal with it and address it. If it's not, then I don't have to worry about it. And then I ask, is it reasonable? If it's reasonable, I consider it. If it's unreasonable, I just dismiss it. Like, how can you worry about unreasonable stuff? I don't even worry about that or concern myself with it.
Yeah, I mentioned obviously that I'm a Knicks fan, and when I watch when I watch games on MSG, I can very much tell that Mike Breen is a Knicks fan, and I think you should be able to tell that because it's the home network, the home broadcast. But when he does a Knicks game on ESPN, I think he does an amazing job of turning that off. And like maybe Celtics fans and Pacers fans will disagree with that, but I absolutely think he sounds like a different announcer calling a Knicks game on ESPN versus MSG. And I don't know how he is able to just turn it off and almost like not even forget that like, oh, right, I am on ESPN and not MSG. Like you would think just because he calls so many Knicks games throughout a season that he would it would almost just be second nature for him to be on ESPN and calling it as if he's the home announcer, but he doesn't, and it's very impressive.
One thing on that, Brandon, like I don't know. I've never talked to Mike about sort of the Knicks broadcast versus the national broadcast. My sense is there's probably not that much of a difference, and it has nothing to do with what he wants or any sort of fandom. My sense is that on a Knicks broadcast, he is tailoring his thing to his audience.
Yeah,
and the audience is different. It includes Knicks fans, but it's different for a national audience. One thing when I have talked to reasonable people about, maybe they think, hey, like a Duke fan thinks that hey, why aren't you more passionate about Duke? You went there, you played there, you played for Coach K. Like, why do you try to be so down the middle? And I'll go, wait a minute. So it's my voice that's biased, not your ears. Because fans carry bias too.
Yeah.
So, like it's not like all the fans are objective. So, if you do a Duke Carolina game, half the people are like, well, you're trying too hard to go down the middle, and the other half are like you said, are saying, you biased clown. How could you say it? Stuff like that. So, part of it has to be figured out, factored in rather the fans' ears. Like, so they're not biased. They're the objective ones, and we're the biased ones. That kind of sounds a little crazy too.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. The fact that we know the people complaining about the biased announcers are biased. So I think that's definitely a great point. You worked some NBA games this season. You even had an NBA playoff assignment. Had you done NBA games on ESPN before this season?
Yes, but it was usually one a year, maybe two, and those I think they call them announcer swap games.
Yeah. Oh, right.
And some years you did them, and other years, there were too many good college games for you to do it. But they approached me. I don't remember what month it was before the season. It was clearly before October because I started doing games in October. But I don't know how many I did, probably about 20, and did 4 playoff games. Had a blast. I mean, it couldn't have been more fun. I love the NBA. I'm a consumer of it. I'm a fan of it, and being able to slide over and do those games was a joyful thing. I really enjoyed it.
How do you like doing NBA games compared to college? Does it feel different?
It does. It's a different rhythm to the game. As you know, NBA games are longer. But there's also more action within that because of the 24-second clock. So I have thought about this a lot. In college games, we tend to dissect every play, and I'm not sure we should do that, but that's sort of the culture of calling a college game. You don't do that in the NBA. It's too fast. So you have to pick your spots as to stuff to point out and discuss, and you can have a little bit more of it can be more conversational, which I really like. But I enjoyed every second of it. And look, one thing you see in the NBA more so than college is they don't miss open shots. They're all the best players in the NBA. In college, you have a lot of NBA players, but they're not all of them. And so it's different. And people say, well, why would you like it? It's more college or better atmospheres and all that, which I don't necessarily agree with. But college is a unique thing, as is the NBA. But it would be like when people say, well, why do you like the NBA more than college? Like, I watch college. That's great. Nobody's arguing with people's choices. But it'd be like, well, why don't you watch high school? Because college is better basketball. And to me, it comes down to the basketball. Like, there's no better basketball in the world than the NBA. And I've always watched it, and I've always loved it.
Yeah. So do you find yourself more impressed with the skill level of the NBA or maybe the toughness and physicality of college basketball?
I'm impressed with both. I mean, I don't want to make it sound like I don't love everything about college basketball. Yeah. I do. But if you prefer, like, I believe this, if you prefer college basketball over the NBA, it's not for the basketball. It's for something else. It's for a team affiliation or the different college atmospheres that are unique. But one thing I learned this year that I did not know or had not experienced, let's put it that way. I've done a lot of amazing college games in the Garden, in Madison Square Garden. It doesn't compare to a Knicks game when the Knicks are good. No way. Like, it's ridiculous how good that is. Not just on the floor, but the atmosphere and everything around it. It was awesome. So, like, I don't feel badly saying the NBA is a better basketball product than college, but college is amazing. They're two unbelievable things, but I think it'd be foolish for me to pretend like, well, college is a better game. It's not.
Did you work games with Breen and Doris Burke this season?
I did, yeah. We had Boston Golden State, and I've worked with Doris forever, and I've never, she's as good a teammate as you can have. and a brilliant basketball mind, brilliant broadcaster. And then I've known and worked with Mike before in those announcer swap games. And we've been friends for quite a while now. And there's nobody I respect more and like more than Mike. So doing a game with them this year was there was kind of a pinch me aspect to it. It was so cool.
Yeah, it seemed, even though it wasn't announced until later in the season, that it seemed like Richard Jefferson was the likely candidate to end up working the NBA Finals with them. But was there a chance that you thought that you could have ended up working the NBA Finals with Breen and Burke if things went really well?
I have no idea. I have no idea how decisions are made at ESPN.
That was never pitched to you like that, though. Like, hey, try it out, and maybe you could end up working the finals or being part of that A team.
No, I mean, nothing was ever discussed with me. The
Right.
thing was, do you want to do this? And I said yes. And then we just went. And so I had no expectations. I had no designs on anything. Maybe part of it was I was so busy throughout the course of the year. I did 60 plus games this year, and that's the most I've ever done in a year. That's a lot. I'm sure NBA broadcasters that do local team stuff are probably going, "You wimp! Like that's nothing." No, that doesn't even get you even close to the finish line. But it was a lot of travel and a lot more on the plate. But it was awesome. Like there was not 1 second of it where I didn't want to dig into whatever I was doing. So like I hate to keep using this word, but it was a joyful year in so many ways. And usually my years are joyful. There's like what and I don't mean to get like Pollyanna here, but what do we have to complain about? Like the only thing I like to complain about is travel and when they put us in crappy hotels. In college, you're going to get more chances for crappy hotels, but outside of that, what's there to complain about? Like this is a great gig. Like who wouldn't trade places with us? I don't know anybody that wouldn't trade with me. And that was one when you asked about practicing law before.
Yeah,
that was one of my favorite parts. Like my law colleagues were so jealous that I got to do this, and they were like, God, you can get over the wall and do this anytime you want. It's fantastic. And then my broadcast colleagues were jealous of my law job because they thought it was more stable. I'm like, you don't understand law. You'd rather not be doing that.
Would you like to continue working a schedule of NBA games in the future?
Yes, but I'm one of those that like whatever they want me to do, I'll do.
Yeah.
Like, look, if they start assigning me to pickleball things and basketballs in the back, like, I don't know if this is going to sound right, but I didn't get into this to be a broadcaster. I got into this because I love basketball. And so I don't think of myself. I know I'm a broadcaster and I've worked at the craft and all that, and I get it. But I mean, I think of myself more as a basketball person. Maybe that's just me trying to make myself feel better about the world. But I'll do whatever ESPN assigns me to do. I don't really ask for much. If they want me to go here versus there, I'll go, and I'm not going to argue about it. And I'm not consulted about, hey, would you rather do this game or that game? Because my answer is always going to be, well, what's closer to my house? If they're going to give me that, because you travel so much, sometimes being a little less travel is more palatable than more travel.
Last thing, are you surprised that Jay Wright is not interested in the Knicks job?
No. I hope this isn't talking out of school, but early on, when Jay first left Villanova and got into broadcasting, he and I were talking, and I said, we were talking about how it's going. And I can't remember how many games he had done, but he had said to me, every game I've been to, I've loved, and not one time have I wished I was out there. And that was a few years ago, so I don't know that anything's changed, but he seems really happy with his decision. It was time for him, and it doesn't mean that he won't change his mind at some point. But I would be surprised if he got back in. Not surprised that he has not accepted one of the myriad of opportunities that are coming his way. Because for everyone you hear about, there's 4 times that you don't hear about.
Yeah. Jay, you were great. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me. Of
course. That is Jay Bilas. I'm Brandon Contes. This is the Awful Announcing Podcast. Please rate and subscribe to this podcast. Please also subscribe to Awful Announcing's YouTube page. But regardless of how you consume Awful Announcing and the Awful Announcing Podcast, thanks for listening and be good.
Thanks for listening to the Awful Announcing Podcast. For the latest news spanning the sports media landscape and more, check out awfulannouncing.com and follow us at Awful Announcing.